My daughters looked me dead in the eye and told me I wasn't their real father. So, I stopped being one. Honestly, they never saw the fallout coming. It all kicked off on a perfectly normal Tuesday afternoon. I had just punched out after yet another brutal day at the office and was just desperate for a quiet evening. Walking through the front door, the house was silent, too silent. A knot immediately tightened in my gut. My wife was glued to her phone at the kitchen table, and the girls? Nowhere. The second I dropped my briefcase, my wife finally glanced up. Her face was strangely tight, holding back something I couldn't immediately place. "Where are the girls?" I asked, trying to sound completely relaxed. She didn't answer. Instead, she just looked back down, her fingers scrolling aimlessly. Then I heard it, a faint, muffled sound of voices drifting from the back of the house. That was weird. The back door was definitely supposed to be locked. I started walking towards the sound, shrugging it off, but as I hit the hallway, I caught a glimpse of my daughters through the living room door. They were huddled on the couch, heads together, whispering. I missed most of it, but the words I did catch were a punch to the stomach. "We don't even have to call Dad anymore," one of them whispered. "He's not our real father. I can't believe Mom actually married him." It was a physical blow. I stopped dead, the air rushing out of my lungs. How could they even think that? I'd raised them since they were infants. I'd been there for every single thing. The scraped knees, the school plays, the agonizing late-night homework sessions. I was their dad, period, whether they accepted it or not. I probably should have just marched in right then and there, but a huge wave of confusion and raw hurt washed over me. I just needed a second to process the bomb they dropped. I backed away silently, my heart absolutely pounding in my chest, a frantic drum against my ribs. The rest of the night was a blur. The girls were remote, almost chilly. They wouldn't meet my eyes. They didn't ask about my day or talk to me unless it was absolutely essential. My wife wasn't much better. She just sat there, quietly nursing her wine, refusing to look my way either. I stayed up late that night, long after everyone else had gone to sleep. Those brutal words kept echoing in my head. Not our real father. What had I missed? I replayed every memory, every interaction. After their biological father vanished, I dedicated myself to being the father they needed. I thought I had succeeded. I was up early the next morning. My wife was still asleep, but the girls were already at the kitchen table, hunched over their phones. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Things felt different now, colder than they had been just days before. I needed answers, yes, but mostly, I just needed to understand the why. Why did they genuinely feel this way? So, I asked them, doing the one thing I never thought I'd do. "Do you girls actually believe I'm not your father?" They didn't even bother to look up. "You're not," one mumbled. "You never really were." The air just left my body. It was happening in slow motion, the words hitting me one by one, my heart hammering like crazy. They looked completely unaffected, utterly casual, even as they were shattering me. They weren't angry, not crying, not even upset. They were just casually dismissing everything I had ever contributed to their lives. "Fine," I said, my voice barely a whisper, tight with suppressed rage. "If that's how you feel, then I guess I won't act like a dad anymore." They still didn't react, completely lost in their screens. I didn't know if I truly meant it, or if it was just a desperate, gut-wrenching reaction. But I said it. The words hung in the silence like a terrible promise. I turned and walked out, not waiting for them to reply. For the next few days, I followed through. I cut off all those little things I'd always done for them. No more breakfast. No more reminders about chores. No questions about their day. No help with homework. I simply went silent. I just stopped. I don't think they noticed immediately. They were so conditioned to my doing everything for them that the change probably didn't register right away. But soon enough, they couldn't ignore it. The first hint of confusion came on the fourth morning. I was reading the newspaper at the table when the youngest shuffled in, still sleepy. She stood there for a few seconds before asking, "Aren't you going to make breakfast?" I just shrugged. "I don't know. You don't actually need me to, do you?" She just stared at me, more bewildered than angry. But the following day, she didn't ask. By the end of the week, the entire atmosphere in the house had shifted. It wasn't just the girls who were uneasy, my wife noticed, too. She saw I wasn't stepping up anymore. I wasn't rushing to help when things went sideways. One evening, she finally confronted me. "Why are you being like this? Why aren't you taking care of them?" I didn't even look up from the TV screen. I'm not their father anymore. They clearly don't want me to be. So why should I pretend? Her silence was deafening. She was completely blindsided, unable to process my response. But I wasn't going to apologize. Not this time. As the days dragged on, the girls started showing clear signs of distress. They truly didn't seem to grasp what had happened. They were confused why I had abandoned the role they expected me to play. It was dawning on them how much I had actually done, now that it was gone. And that's when things really started to twist. It began subtly, quick, worried glances exchanged between my wife and the girls. Still, they walked past me in the hall as if I were nothing more than a piece of forgotten furniture. The house had become a hollow shell, empty of laughter or any real warmth. The difference from before was jarring, but I had my reasons for maintaining the distance. They had set the boundary the day they declared I wasn't their father, and I refused to cross back over it. Then, one night, the tension finally snapped. The girls had been unusually withdrawn at dinner, eyes locked on their plates, seemingly fascinated by the food rather than the family at the table. I could feel the argument building, heavy and unspoken, in the air. After dinner, the youngest finally broke. "Why aren't you helping anymore?" Her voice was small, shaky, but there was an unmistakable demand in it. I kept reading my book. "You made it clear you didn't want my help." She shook her head, a deep frown creasing her forehead. "That's not what we meant. We didn't think you'd just stop being there for us." "Maybe you should have thought about that before you told me I wasn't your father," I said, my voice sharp and cold. It landed like a physical blow. Her face twisted with confusion, like she was only now understanding the gravity of the situation. "But we didn't mean it like that. We were just..." "Just what?" I cut her off. "Just angry? You didn't stop to think how it would feel to hear that? To have everything I am dismissed like I'm a complete stranger?" The room went completely silent. She tried to speak, but the words failed her. The sheer reality of her statement finally hit home. I wasn't some stranger. I had been their rock, their father, and now they were only just starting to realize what that meant. My wife, who had been quiet, spoke up. "You don't have to carry on like this." I took a moment before answering her. What could I say? I'd poured everything into this family, my time, my energy, all my love. And in one terrible instant, they had thrown it back at me. "Maybe I don't have to be like this," I finally replied. "But I won't pretend nothing happened, either. You all drew the line. You made it perfectly clear where I stand in this house. I'm just the guy who brings home the money and fixes a leaky faucet, right?" My wife softened for a moment, looking at me with pity, but I couldn't accept her sympathy. I didn't want an apology. I just needed them to understand the devastating pain of being pushed aside. The days that followed blurred into a weird mix of mounting tension and painful clarity. The girls noticed that their mother wasn't stepping in anymore. She was no longer their shield, no longer trying to patch things up between us, and that seemed to rattle them more than anything. They were used to the comfortable, predictable life we had built, where I was always the father, the reliable fixer. With me gone from that role, the entire foundation felt unstable. My withdrawal, my refusal to engage, had created a huge void they were completely failing to fill. By the end of the week, I had fully detached. No lunches, no vitamin reminders, no fixing broken toys, no answering school questions. I barely even acknowledged them when they spoke. They wanted a father? Well, they could go find one. One evening, I was sitting in the living room when the youngest cautiously came in and sat beside me. Her eyes were lowered, her hands nervously twisting in her lap. "Dad, can we talk?" I didn't look up right away. "About what?" I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean what I said. We didn't mean it. We were just... I don't know. I didn't think it would hurt you." I let the silence linger. I felt the weight of her regret, but a deep well of anger still boiled inside me. I wanted to believe her, but how could I forgive and forget so easily? What if she was only apologizing because the discomfort had become unbearable? I turned the page of my book, pretending I hadn't heard a thing. "You really should have thought about that before," I murmured. Her shoulders slumped. I thought she might cry, but she didn't. She just sat there, staring at the rug, her face pale and taut with shame. Guilt was etched all over her features. For a fleeting moment, I almost felt sorry for her, but then the rational voice took over. This was exactly what I had worked for. This was the unavoidable consequence of their choices. The next day, the full reality of my silence finally hit my wife. She stormed in, frustration radiating off her. "You've made your point. Why are you punishing them like this?" "I'm not punishing them," I replied, my voice calm on the surface but my insides churning. "I'm giving them the space to figure things out. They don't get to just dismiss me and then expect everything to snap back to normal." She stared at me for a long time, trying to find a loophole in my logic. Finally, she let out a sigh. "I think they realize what they did, but you're just making it worse. This isn't fair." I stood up, weary of the argument. Fair? They are the ones who made this unfair in the first place. The days that followed were a chaotic blur of strained silence, clumsy attempts at making up, and a growing, heavy realization that the connection between us was slowly but surely dying. The girls spoke to me less and less. They asked for nothing. They couldn't even hide their profound discomfort around me. For the first time, I could truly see how wide the gulf between us had grown. It was obvious they regretted their words, but I had to ask myself, was I too numb now to care? The shift finally became undeniable the following weekend. The girls, who had been actively avoiding me for days, started watching me differently. There was a raw hesitation in their eyes, a dawning recognition of the emptiness I had created. They were finally feeling what I had been feeling all along, unwanted, disconnected, and completely dismissed. It wasn't just about the initial, cruel words anymore. It was the suffocating weight of my silence that had finally begun to sink in. I honestly didn't know how much longer I could maintain this distance. Part of me still hoped they would grasp the immensity of what they'd lost. But another part of me doubted if this agonizing process was truly necessary. That Saturday, my wife asked me to go with her to the youngest's parent-teacher conference. I hesitated. There was still so much unspoken, so much raw tension neither of us knew how to handle. I knew she was hoping the shared ritual would somehow smooth things over, but I refused to pretend things were fine. "I'll go," I said, my tone completely flat. We got to the school, and the whole atmosphere felt wrong. I hadn't been to one of these in years. My daughter was sitting in her small chair, shoulders hunched, her eyes flicking nervously between her mother and me, waiting for the inevitable blow-up. We sat through the meeting, grades, behavior, the standard stuff. But what truly unnerved me was my daughter's inability to look at me, the way she barely acknowledged my presence. I felt totally invisible. Afterward, we stood outside in the crisp autumn air. My wife turned to me, her face strained. "You need to talk to them," she urged, her voice low and desperate. "I have talked," I countered, avoiding her gaze. "And they've made their feelings perfectly clear. They aren't going to figure this out alone. You're their father. You're supposed to be the adult." I stopped walking. "I'm supposed to lead the way? Really?" The bitterness I felt was impossible to hide. "Is that really what you think? Because the last time I checked, they were the ones who decided I wasn't their father. They said it, not me." She had no defense. She just stared at me, completely speechless. The drive home was quiet. When we pulled into the driveway, I saw my two daughters standing by the door, looking awkward and anxious. They'd been waiting. A wave of deep-seated resentment washed over me. I walked straight past them, heading into the house without saying a single word. The silence that followed was unbearable. But this time, they weren't avoiding me. They followed, hovering right inside the living room entrance. I sat down, determined to maintain the distance that had become my protective shield. "Dad," the youngest whispered, her voice tiny. "Can we talk?" I paused before answering. I could feel them standing there. The air was thick with their sorrow. I had to fight the urge to crumble. "You want to talk now?" I asked quietly, not lifting my eyes from the television. "What happened to all those times you said I wasn't your real dad? You didn't need to talk to me back then." The raw guilt on her face was unmistakable, but it didn't lessen my pain. I was utterly exhausted from being the one who always had to fix everything, who had to play the role of the devoted father when they so clearly didn't appreciate it. "I didn't mean it," she pleaded softly. "I was just confused and mad. I don't know why I ever said that." The sincerity was there, but it didn't magically erase the past. The wound was deep, and I wasn't sure if we could ever fully recover the way we were. "I know you didn't mean it," I finally conceded. "But it still hurts. I've been trying to figure out why you said it. Why you would just push me away like that after everything I gave you." She had no answer for that. Her sister, who had been watching the agonizing exchange from the corner, remained silent. After a few tense moments, the older girl spoke. "We weren't thinking, Dad. I'm truly sorry. We both are." I looked at them, their faces flushed, their eyes wide with remorse. But even with their apologies hanging in the air, I couldn't shake the heavy feeling that it was too late. Too much damage had been done. The emotional rift was too wide. "Sorry doesn't fix everything," I said gently. "You can't just tell me I'm not your father and then expect everything to just snap back to normal when it's convenient for you." My words landed heavily. I saw them both flinch. Their regret was palpable, but it brought me no comfort. It didn't heal the pain. My wife walked into the room then, standing at the doorway, quietly watching the scene. She understood the gravity of what had happened, the toll it had taken on all of us, but she had no idea how to make it right. The girls stood there for a few more moments, shoulders slumped, faces etched with shame and sorrow. But it wasn't the verbal apology that finally shifted things. It was the stark, awful realization that they had finally grasped what it meant to lose someone. Not just me, the man, but the entire stability of family itself. And then, for the first time, I realized that they weren't the only ones who needed to sort themselves out. I did too. Maybe there was a path back for us, but it would require more than just empty words. It would take real time, restored trust, and the one thing we had all lost: effort. "I don't know where we go from here," I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. "But I need you to show me you care. Don't just say it." The youngest girl nodded, her face pale, but a new spark of understanding ignited in her eyes. "We will," she said, her voice small but steady. In that very moment, a powerful realization hit me. It wasn't just about them finally understanding the weight of their words. It was about me understanding how dangerously far I had allowed this silence and this hurt to go. Maybe, just maybe, we could still fix this. But it would demand effort from every single one of us. And for the first time in days, I felt a flicker of hope. Do you believe the father was justified in completely withdrawing his care to make his daughters understand the impact of their words? Or did his actions risk causing a deeper, permanent fracture in their relationship? What immediate, concrete steps can this family take to rebuild trust, given that the daughter's apology was driven primarily by the discomfort of losing their support system? Thanks for watching, and don't to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Share your thoughts about this story in the comments.